When Jason handed me the cardboard box, I didn't think twice. We were reorganizing the garage, a Saturday project meant to distract us from bills and the quiet ache of routine. I was in leggings and a paint-splattered hoodie, hair twisted into a bun, feeling more domestic than dramatic. "This one looks like yours," he said, tapping the dust-coated lid with a gentle smile. "Old paperwork?" It was. But not the kind you forget. I took the box with a nod, hoping my voice didn't shake. Probably taxes, or college stuff. Lie number 1. Not a big one, just the kind of white lie you toss into the air like confetti, hoping it'll float instead of land. But as soon as I opened the flaps and saw the manila folder marked Divorce Decree LMNRS, I knew the air was gone, and gravity had done its job. Jason didn't ask anything at first, he just kept sorting tools, whistled a little, hummed under his breath, but I saw it. The stillness in his shoulders, the pause between each movement, the way his eyes stopped landing on mine. He wasn't angry yet. He was calculating, connecting dots he hadn't realized were even part of the puzzle. We had been together for 3 years, moved in after 1, talked about marriage around year 2, lightly, carefully, like it was something fragile between us, not yet solid enough to press on. He had asked about my past before, casually, over wine, after long walks. "Ever been married?" I'd smiled, laughed it off. "Not really, just one really bad mistake in my early 20s. Another lie, and one I thought I could justify. The truth? I was married once, for 14 months. To a man named Ryan. Charming, successful, and controlling in ways that took me far too long to recognize. He never hit me, never screamed, but he isolated me, criticized the way I dressed, checked my phone, made sure I didn't see my friends, told me no one else would love someone like me, not after him. When I left, I didn't just change addresses. I changed names, cities, careers, and I buried the story deep enough that even I stopped digging. Jason wasn't like Ryan. He never raised his voice. He made me coffee every morning. He called my mother on her birthday. He made it easy to believe I'd never have to revisit the part of me that broke before him. But now, the past had come crawling back, dressed in legal print and my own handwriting. I sat on the edge of the garage step that evening, clutching the folder I never meant to open again. Jason joined me a few minutes later. He didn't speak. Just sat there, elbows on knees, staring out at the street like it might offer answers. Finally I whispered, "I was going to tell you." He didn't look at me. "When?" I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. So I said, "It didn't feel relevant." He turned, slowly. His voice wasn't angry. Just tired. "You lied, I omitted. Same thing." And that's when I said it, the sentence I thought would make it better. But instead, it broke us wide open. That was a lifetime ago. Who even cares? He stood. Just stood. And in the longest silence I've ever endured, he said, "I do." And then he walked inside. I stayed out there until the sun set, until the streetlights flickered on, until I could no longer feel my fingers from the cold, or maybe from shame. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because it hadn't sunk in. That sometimes, the things we hide don't rot. They just wait. And when they return, they don't knock. They break the door down. Jason didn't come to bed that night. I heard him downstairs. Slow, quiet footsteps across the kitchen floor, the soft creak of the couch under his weight. He was always a man of comfort. Always slept better in bed than anywhere else, but not that night. And I didn't sleep either. Because no amount of pillow flipping or deep breathing could drown out the weight of what I hadn't said. By morning, the coffee was made. Jason always made coffee, even when angry, but today there was only one mug on the table. Mine. I sipped it slowly, letting the silence sit between us like a third presence in the room. Finally, he broke it. "I kept wondering," he said, voice low, "why you didn't tell me." I stared into the mug. I didn't think it mattered anymore. He looked up then. Eyes tired, not furious, which made it worse somehow. "It didn't matter that you had a marriage before me. What mattered is that you pretended it never existed." "I didn't pretend," I whispered. "I just didn't explain." He laughed, sharp and quiet. "You told me you'd never been married. I said I made a mistake. I just didn't give it a title. You gave it less than a title. You gave it nothing." I felt heat rise in my chest, shame mostly. But also defensiveness, that old familiar wall I built when I was too afraid to feel soft. "Jason, I was 24. I married someone who manipulated me. I was embarrassed. I wanted it gone." "And I get that," he snapped. "I do. But I wasn't asking you to relive it. I was asking you to be honest with me. The words stung. Not because they were cruel, they weren't, but because they were true. I hadn't lied to protect him. I'd lied to protect myself, from the look he was giving me now. Like I was someone he didn't know. You've been in my life for 3 years, Lauren, he continued. 3 years of talking about building a future, and now I'm wondering how much of that was real. That hit harder than I expected. I looked up. Everything was real, except the parts I didn't know. Silence again. Only this time, it wasn't the kind that asked for space. It was the kind that carved it. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms like he was holding himself together. You know what I hate the most? He said quietly. It's not even that you lied. It's that you gave me a version of you, one you curated, cleaned, softened, and let me fall in love with that version. And now I have to wonder if I ever really met you at all. I felt the tears come then. Slow. Hot. Quiet. Because I knew the answer to that question. And it wasn't the one I wanted to give. He stood, took his keys from the counter. I need time, he said. Are you leaving? I'm thinking. About what? About whether I can trust someone who waited 3 years to tell me the truth. He didn't slam the door. He never did things like that. Jason wasn't a man of dramatics, just decisions. Final ones. I sat in the kitchen for hours after he left. Watched the coffee grow cold in its cup. Watched the sun slide across the countertop like it was trying to move on before I was ready to. I picked up the folder, opened it again, looked at the dry ink of the divorce decree. My name. His name. The date we signed our separate lives. And then I looked at the blank space between that page and the one that followed. The empty. The omitted. The silence I had chosen. And I realized something I hadn't let myself feel before. It wasn't that I didn't trust Jason with the truth. It's that I didn't trust the world to see me as more than what had broken me. But by trying to erase my damage, I had erased part of myself. And Jason didn't fall in love with my scars. He fell in love with a version of me who hid them well. Too well. I put the folder back into the box, sealed it with tape. And for the first time in years, I didn't want it buried again. I wanted it read, understood, owned. Because if Jason couldn't love the full truth of me, the jagged, honest, imperfect version, then maybe what we had wasn't as real as I thought. And if he could, then maybe we'd find our way back. The day after Jason left, I opened a journal I hadn't touched in years. The pages were yellowing, the spine cracked. It smelled like time, like something left behind on purpose. And there, in messy cursive from a younger, more frightened version of myself, I found the words. Today he called me stupid in front of the waitress. He laughed afterward, said I was being sensitive. I apologized. That was from month 2 of my marriage to Ryan. People always imagine abuse as bruises, as screams, as police reports and broken glass. But mine came wrapped in silk sheets and champagne smiles. He was successful, charming, well-spoken. Everyone thought I had landed the dream. No one saw the way he slowly erased me, not violently, meticulously. It began with comments about my clothes. You know, that skirt's a little desperate looking. Then my friends. Ashley talks too much. Doesn't she drink a lot? Are you sure she's a good influence? Then my work. A teacher? You could do better, or at least something with more respect. And then me. You're lucky I put up with you. Not many men would. I stayed for 14 months. Because when you've been slowly made small, you start believing the box around you is just your size. And the worst part, I thought I loved him. The night I left, it wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw things. I didn't cry. I waited until he was on a business trip, packed 2 bags, left a note, and drove 8 hours to a city I'd never visited before. It wasn't courage. It was desperation. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media, took a job at a bookstore just to stay invisible, and for a while, I didn't exist. When I met Jason, I wasn't ready, but he made it easy to pretend I was. He didn't pry, he didn't pressure, and I mistook that for permission to leave pieces of myself in the dark. I told him vague things. I had a bad breakup. He wasn't good to me. It took me a while to heal, and each time he nodded, kissed my forehead, and told me I was safe now, I pushed the truth deeper underground. Because deep down, I didn't want to risk him seeing the version of me that had once been weak, manipulated, broken. I wanted him to love the rebuilt version. The polished version. The woman who had it together. But now, sitting alone in our apartment, surrounded by echoes of a love that had begun unraveling, I realized I hadn't been protecting Jason from the truth. I'd been protecting the illusion that I was someone worth loving, only if I came without dents, and that illusion was never sustainable. I took out a piece of paper and began writing, not to Jason, to myself. A confession of sorts. You were scared. You believed silence was strength, but silence is just fear with better posture. You survived, and then you lied, not to manipulate, but to shrink the part of you that still felt ashamed. But shame thrives in shadows, and now it's time to drag it into the light. I folded the letter, placed it in the same folder as the divorce decree. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but for the first time, I didn't feel like it needed to be hidden. That night, I dreamed of Ryan, not the real Ryan, but the Ryan who used to sit across from me, smiling while he chipped away at who I was. In the dream, he said, "Even Jason left you. See, I was right all along." I woke up gasping, sweating, angry, because I realized I was still carrying his voice inside my head. And maybe that was the real lie. Not the one I told Jason, but the one I kept telling myself, "You're only lovable if no one sees where you've been." I looked around the apartment, the framed photos, the shared coffee mugs, the books we stacked side by side. Jason didn't fall in love with a liar. He fell in love with a version of me that couldn't bear to be broken again. And maybe, just maybe, if I told him that truth, not the history, but the heart of it, he'd understand. Or maybe he wouldn't, but at least I'd finally be whole. Jason came back on a Tuesday evening. He didn't knock. He still had a key. I was sitting on the couch with my knees pulled up, wearing the sweater he once said made me look like I belonged in a Hallmark movie. When the door opened, I didn't stand. I just looked at him. He looked tired, not angry, just like someone who had been carrying too many questions in his chest and not enough air. He didn't speak at first, just walked in, sat in the armchair across from me, and stared at the floor. Then finally, I read the letter. My mouth went dry. I had slipped it under his door 2 nights before, not expecting a reply, only needing to know it had been heard. He continued, voice even. "I didn't know any of that. About Ryan, about what he said to you, about what he made you believe." I nodded slowly, not apologetically, just acknowledging. "I didn't want to define myself by that version of me," I said quietly, "so I tried to live like she never existed." He looked up then, straight into my eyes. "But she does. She's part of you." I swallowed hard. "I know, I just didn't want you to meet her." Silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I didn't fall in love with the part of you that's perfect, Lauren. I fell in love with the way you laugh when you're uncomfortable, the way you always leave one sock on when you sleep, the way you hum to yourself when you're thinking too hard. You were never perfect to me. You were just real, until suddenly, you weren't." That one hit, because I knew what he meant. There's a difference between being flawed and being hidden. And I had blurred the line. "So what happens now?" I asked. He leaned back, exhaled slowly. "I don't know. I still love you." The words felt heavy between us. Not warm, not sweet, just true. And a little sad. "But I don't know if I can trust you again yet." I nodded. "I'm not asking for that, not right away." "Then what are you asking for?" I met his gaze. "To be seen. Completely. Even if you decide to walk away after." I stood up, walked to the hallway, and brought back the box. The same box that started this entire unraveling. I set it between us. "There's a folder in here, and a letter I wrote to myself the night you left. I'm not proud of who I used to be, but I'm not ashamed anymore either." He didn't reach for the box, just looked at it. Then back at me. "That's not for me to read," he said quietly. "You already showed me the only version of you I needed to see tonight." And for the first time, I cried. Not out of guilt, not out of fear, but because I finally understood something I never did in all those years of hiding. You can't be loved fully until you stop trying to curate who you are. Jason stood, walked toward me, paused, then gently he touched my cheek. Not possessive, not pitying, just present. "I need time," he said. I nodded. "Take all of it. But don't hide again," he added, "not even from yourself." He left. But this time, the silence he left behind wasn't cruel, it was honest. It wasn't closure, it was possibility. And as I sat alone with the folder in my lap, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole. Maybe for the first time in years. Because I didn't need him to forgive me. I just needed him to see me, and he did. Jason didn't come back the next day, or the one after. He sent me one text a week later, "Thanks for your honesty." That was it. And oddly, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt acknowledged. I stopped waiting, not because I didn't love him, but because I finally realized that healing wasn't about getting someone back. It was about getting yourself back. And I had spent too many years being a version of myself I thought others could tolerate. Pretty, neat, undamaged. That wasn't me. I started going to therapy again. Not crisis mode therapy, not damage control therapy, real, slow, soul-unpacking therapy, the kind that asks more questions than it answers. My therapist, Elise, was a petite woman with eyes that didn't flinch. In our second session, she asked, "Do you think your omission was selfish or protective?" I hesitated, then said, "I think it started as protection, but somewhere along the line, it became control." She nodded slowly. Control of what? Of how I was perceived, of what version of me felt safe to show. "And who were you hiding her from?" "Everyone," I said, and then quieter. "Mostly, me." There's something strange about confronting your past in a room that smells like lavender and legal pads. It's not dramatic. It's surgical. Little by little, I peeled back the defenses, and beneath them, I didn't find weakness. I found a woman who had been too strong for too long, and who finally wanted to stop fighting herself. I donated the box, not its contents, just the physical container. I bought a fireproof file cabinet and placed the folder inside it. Alphabetized, proper, labeled, not buried. Just there, where truth belonged. I wrote letters I never sent, to Ryan, to my 24-year-old self, to Jason. One of them said, "You loved me as best you could, and I made you love a ghost. That's on me. But it was never to hurt you. It was just the only way I knew how to feel safe." I started volunteering at a shelter for women restarting after abusive relationships. The first time I walked through the doors, I almost turned around. But then I saw her, a girl no older than 23, holding a toddler with one hand and a tissue with the other. She looked up at me and asked, "Do you work here?" I said, "No, but I've been, where you're coming from." And in her tear-stained nod, I saw a kind of understanding that no clean slate could ever give me. Only survival could. One morning, I ran into Jason's sister at a bookstore. She looked surprised to see me. After a few moments of awkward hellos, she said, "He's doing okay, reading a lot." I smiled. "That sounds like him." She paused before adding, "He doesn't hate you, he just needed to rebuild some things." "Me too," I said. "He told me what you went through," she said gently. "He cried, Lauren." And my throat closed, because I realized I had hurt someone who loved me, even if unintentionally, and yet, he still saw me. That mattered more than whether he stayed. A month later, I opened my inbox and saw a short email from Jason. "I started seeing someone. Just wanted you to know, I'm doing better. Hope you are too." I stared at it for a long time. My stomach twisted. Not out of jealousy, but out of the ache of finality. I replied, "I am, and I'm glad you are too. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." I didn't cry, because by then I had already let go. Let go of the woman who needed someone else's forgiveness to feel whole. Let go of the story I tried to rewrite through silence. Let go of the idea that hiding pain made me stronger. I wasn't asking to be forgiven. I was asking to be seen. And now I was. Sometimes, I still catch myself apologizing to no one. In the kitchen while making coffee. In the shower when a memory surfaces. At red lights when silence gets too loud. It's this reflex I can't shake, like I'm always a sentence away from needing to explain why I didn't say something sooner. But now, I catch myself, and I say something different. "You did the best you could with what you knew." And I let that be enough. Life didn't change drastically after Jason. I didn't move across the country. I didn't cut my hair or adopt a cat. I stayed. In the same apartment. With the same neighbors, the same coffee shop, the same routines. Because healing, it turns out, doesn't always require escape. Sometimes it asks you to sit still. To stay with the ache. To make friends with the version of yourself you used to run from. I stopped looking at other couples wondering if they had secrets. I stopped wondering if Jason had found someone softer. Someone easier. I stopped assuming that being difficult to love made me unworthy. And instead, I started asking different questions. Not, am I good enough? But, am I honest enough with myself to let someone truly know me? That question changed everything. A year later, I saw Jason again. Not planned. Not dramatic. Just the way life weaves people back into your line of sight when you least expect it. I was sitting at a park bench reading a book. He walked by with someone, a woman. Pretty. Kind-looking. He didn't see me at first, but she did. She glanced at me, then whispered something. Jason turned. Our eyes met. And for the first time since it all fell apart, we smiled. Not as lovers, not as what-ifs, just as people who had made peace with their part in each other's story. That night, I thought about the folder again. It still sat in the file cabinet. I hadn't touched it in months, not because I was avoiding it, but because I no longer needed to check that it was real. I didn't need to keep touching the wound to know I had healed. There's a kind of strength that comes not from pretending you were never broken, but from standing exactly where the shatter happened and saying, this version of me, the one with cracks and context and memory, she's still me, and she's enough. People like to say closure is about ending things neatly, but I think closure is when you stop asking for a different ending and start living in the truth of what happened without needing it to hurt anymore. Sometimes I think of Ryan, not with fear, not even with anger, just as a chapter I outgrew. I don't want revenge. I don't want apology. I just want space between then and now. And I finally built that. As for Jason, he gave me more than he knew. He gave me the mirror I was too afraid to look into. And when I finally did, I didn't see a liar. I saw someone who was scared, someone who had learned to survive through silence, and someone who eventually chose to speak anyway. That matters. That's enough. So now I live. Not loudly, not with something to prove, just fully. I laugh more, I ask for what I need, I tell the truth, not because I expect people to stay, but because I want to stay with myself. I'm not perfect, but I am present, and I am whole. Because that version of me, the one who hid, who lied, who omitted, she was me too. And if I can hold space for her, without shame, without erasure, then maybe love will find its way back to me someday. But even if it doesn't, I'll be okay. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting to be chosen. I already chose me.